Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scott Harbath podcast. How you doing tonight, Mike?
Doing good, doing good. A little short story coming at you tonight, something we haven't done in a long time.
Yeah, when's the last time we did a short story?
I mean, I remember Chris Howdy's Insurrection Day.
Yeah.
We had one by Ward Larson, but I think I might have just soloed that. Assassin's Dawn,
Yeah.
David Sladen's origin. Might be it. We did an anthology years ago. It was a short story thriller anthology, which was interesting. Well, it wasn't that, not
Yeah, but it
something
was
worthwhile.
it was a series of short stories. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love it. Like, this is a fun way to take a series and a character I love and have like a low stakes, short term, just like burst of enjoyment. That's not a commitment of this is going to be my book for the next 2-3 weeks. It's like, that's a nice way to approach it.
Yeah. No, like I was able to listen to this. Like it didn't even fill up an entire car ride for me.
Same, one
And
commute.
it's the kind of thing that can be placed anywhere. That's like the beauty of it, right? And even, if you listen to the audiobook version there, after you listen to the actual short story, you get a little excerpt from Brad, and he says that this was the second thing that he wrote. So I guess we should say we're talking about this Athens Solution. Athena, I'm thinking of Athena Project. Athens Solution short story. It was the second thing that he ever wrote.
So that's actually how I interpreted it at first.
Lions of Lucerne.
But I went back and read that, and I think he said he wrote it 4 years after Lions of Lucerne. So there might have been other books in between. Because I thought I heard that as well. That was something I put in the chat, was that he said it's the second thing he ever wrote. I think I heard that wrong. Do you remember him actually saying it?
I think maybe he came up with the concept of the idea like very early on.
Yeah.
And then for what we actually read so I think the anthology came out
4 years after Lions.
4 years after Lions of Lucerne. But then he changed it for this republishing when they published it with, the what was it, the first chapter of Code of Conduct?
Code of Conduct, yeah. Which I was curious about why and how that happened, how this thing got republished after being in a thriller anthology that I think he said was for International Thriller Fest or Thriller Writers, a conference, and like how he was able to repurpose something that had been written so earlier in his career and then do it after Code of Conduct, which I think is like 2016 or so. It's one of the like relatively recent books. That was interesting, but he said something in that afterword. One, it was kind of cool to hear a recording of Brad in an audiobook.
Yeah.
Giving the actual afterword. But something else he said was that all of this came from a conversation he had with Vince Flynn.
Yeah, and that was cool.
That was interesting that he said he had a conversation that he really recalls vividly with Vince and asked him, would you ever go back to one of your earlier works and revisit it? And Vince said, hell no, like declaratively. I would drive myself nuts with so many things I would want to change and adjust and edit and redo. And Brad kind of agreed and gave this analogy of like, it's raising children. You can't look back on things you've done in the past and be like, if I only did this one thing when I raised them, maybe, their path would have been different. He's like, you do get to the point where you close the door, send them off to college, they go out into the real world, and your job, you had the mark on them that you had, and it's up to them to then figure out their life. And he's like, you can't go back and nitpick every little choice you made when they were 6 years old. And, they would have gone to Harvard if only I did this thing. And, interesting. But do you think that's Vince Flynn saying, I would never go back and write more in that time period? Like, I would never want to see the sequel to Kill Shot? Or do you think that's Vince saying, I would never go back and try to edit and change things? Like Tolkien did. Tolkien took his universe and like would tear it to shreds and go find thousands of pages of things he'd have to change because, he came up with an idea about elves that was later changed and everything else would have to be adjusted. I think he's saying that. which means the door might still be open for going back and revisiting old works in terms of adding to them or doing a sequel to them.
Yeah, I read it more so as the fact that he would never want to go back and change a novel. Like if like if you're given the option to, hey, all right, 20 years later, re-edit your novel, like or what would you change about that?
Yeah,
because then but there is a thing to say, and one of the reasons why I look at like a George R.R. Martin, right? When you build this giant world, or Tolkien, right? And you have to keep everything straight. You're locked into these boxes. You work yourself into a hole.
Yeah.
And if you truly want to be 100% accurate all the time, then it gets really complicated. And it, there's a reason why he's been struggling to finish that story. So in a sense, I understand why it even makes sense, right? Every time we've talked to some of these authors and we've done the more deep divey, conversations we like to have.
Yeah.
They forget. We know more about their novels than they do, right? Because one, they're on to the next novel. Right?
And if it's just published, they still don't know about it, even when it's just published, because they're writing the next one.
Because they're writing the next one, right? And so they've not completely forgotten everything, but they don't want to be asked these nitty gritty details, or like, oh, why did you do that? Or,
and that happened with multiple authors. They both have like
it's not just been Brad, it's not been Kyle, it's been a lot of the authors when we ask them those nitty gritty type questions. It kind of goes in one ear, not to say goes in one ear and out the other, but they kind of have to compartmentalize, right?
Yeah, they're on to the next.
Truly, these things are quote unquote standalone novels, are supposed to be, right? But he did say, and he hasn't quite followed up on this, he did say he really enjoyed this, and you should expect to see more of these going forward.
There's more in the pipeline,
obviously he gets busy, things don't happen. But I will say, like, there are other novels, not in this genre, but other series that have spin-offs that are short stories. And I love it because it gives you an opportunity, kind of like you said earlier, to play around. You can, because oftentimes in these short stories, you won't do the main character. If you do the main character, you do a side plot that literally could be, it fits so perfectly into that, it was happening off book, off page, and that you can have implications in there that don't necessarily have to impact your main story. If you think about this, right? The recent Mitrap book is kind of like a short story in that essence, right? It was a full-size novel, but he decided to insert in a time where, he couldn't make any big changes. He had to fit within this box, but he wanted to tell a story that Mitch was doing off page, right?
Yeah. That's usually a short story format. Like you would plug in a short story there, not a whole novel. Yeah.
So kudos again
to Dom.
You can go visit our pod where we talked about how much we loved Capture or Kill.
Capture or Kill. Man, wouldn't it be great to talk to Don Bentley about that choice for Capture or Kill?
Yeah, you can go and listen to our kudos on Capture or Kill and about how,
we loved it. We liked it. Yeah.
Normally, a new Oath of Loyalty cover. Oh. Interesting. But anyways, I'm getting off topic tonight. Yeah, and I liked what Brad did here, and this could have taken place any time between, the first book to the most recent book, right? And it leaves us with enough wanting more. Like, we want to know about, like, this organization that was paying the station chief, or was it the station chief, off to get this like super secret weapon that could, stop planes or essentially blind the world to like where the planes are.
Yeah. The ambassador. I think it was the ambassador to Greece.
Right. So, we've never touched on that thread again, but it leaves you wanting more.
Scott getting hit in the bicep with a freaking spear
with
gun.
An arrow, with this,
right. He's going to be out of the game for a little bit. So I think it's a futile exercise to try to fit this in. Like, that's usually what you and I would do. We'd nerd out over have any of these characters come up? Have we seen this like March 21st or whatever, the Greek extremist terrorist group, socialist terrorist group, Marxist
September
group, September something? They were fictional. I don't think they come up in any other books. Either of these guys, like the gangsters who run that, Papandreou, I think was one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I just don't think it's worth our while if we're gonna see these guys again. And when one guy gets away, right? That's the closing quote.
The third guy, I guess, the
security
protective detail. Yeah,
he was one of the diplomatic security guys, and the end quote is, "The good guys don't always win."
Right. Yeah, and that's not normally what happens in these novels. Right?
That's not normally what happens, and if you do that, it's most likely setting up a future publication to come in and say, well, Scott Harvath found him and kicked his ass. Sure. Like we're going to see that payoff. And I think Brad even mentions this in the afterword. He says, like, what happens if our heroes don't win? And it's kind of unique in this genre to let that happen and be okay with leaving it at that. Short story, one of the bad guys gets away. He has a device which could be extraordinarily damaging. And that was pretty sick when we found out what the device does when they patch into JFK air traffic control and the planes just start disappearing. It's like, oh, shit. But I don't think there's any value into going back to this main series and being like, when is there enough time for Scott Harvath to heal between books and have his bicep sewn up? And, were any of the characters in a book ever working with this terrorist organization from the Greek islands? Nah, it's just a fun little ride.
Yeah, or even like seeing the two characters that are his friends, right?
Yeah,
he always has to have these cast of characters. This guy owns a bar. He's used them many a time, or he's visited this bar many a time. We've never been there in any of these novels.
But that's so Thor, that each book has different characters Brad or Scott brings into the fold and operates with, and they're one time.
And especially associated with some sort of travel experience, right? Yeah, this is probably based off some guy he actually met at a bar. Yeah,
totally.
In Mykonos,
well, he said he was working at a bar in Mykonos or Santorini or one of the Greek islands. Like, yeah, probably knew these dudes who just go sailing all the time. Imagine if they were actually, ex special forces. And,
right.
Yeah, that's cool. No. What'd you think about the actual plot, though, of this ambassador right in the very beginning gets taken? There's this attack in Athens.
Oh, killed.
Yes, killed, but we learn later he's alive. What do you think about that twist? And what do you think about the setting of where Scott is like going down this set of secret hidden stairs in this house, down to this cliff, which leads to the water in this cave? That was kind of cool.
Yeah, and like the first chapter of this short story is essentially no Scott at all, right? It's a mission that is going on. There's this drop where the ambassador is going to go give the money and get this device, but then we get the explosion, and then we get the quote unquote taken out of the ambassador and the killing, and then Scott gets brought in to deal with this as an aftermath. Yeah, and I thought that just the description of the setting, being in Greece, being in these, I could just envision this wherever they were, like on the coast, having to go down into the tunnels. They pop out, and there's this beach with these, they're trying to set up these, escape vessels in the water, and then you have to have a harpoon gun in there that he uses. Yeah, and of course, like when, just the idea of, and we've gotten this in a couple novels recently where we're on an island, they go into cover, therefore you lose comms, right? Like,
right.
So that you get this sense of anxiety, building of tension, pressure, that kind of thing. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun. The one thing I thought was weird, it was obviously cool when we realized these ambassadors alive, and then they have to have this fill in the gaps chat of why he turned, and everybody has a price, and there's a whole lot of money to be made. But when Scott lands on that beach at the bottom of the cave complex, and the ambassador's like welding something, he's like, and I get he's probably doing something to set up those escape devices. I think they were like underwater propulsion pods or something.
Yeah.
Diver propulsion pods. But the dude was just down there with like a freaking welding gun going to work. Like, what was he doing down? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, why is he just doing that in the moment right here? This big escape, and he's just like chilling down there. Or maybe they drew him in because the other security guys then, had his six and snuck up on Scott, and that's how they ultimately almost drowned him. And that was kind of cool. They were chaining up dudes under the water to kill him.
Yeah, they duct taped and chained him to put him
chain
under the
Scott.
water. Yeah, Scott felt like he was drowning.
But it was just, I guess it was a setup.
The whole setup, right, is Scott goes to this house where he thinks, someone who has the device is going to be there. But in fact, it's someone else, and they immediately get shot while Scott's looking at him, and they want him to ID the corpse, and then at all costs he has to find the device. Meanwhile, there's a sniper about. So yeah, if they knew that the sniper was going to be there to take out this guy, this quote unquote loose end, why was there this frantic rush to get away? Because did they really think that there was going to be other people there? That's what I don't understand. Why was the ambassador even there?
Yeah, it was a little rough around the edges, a couple of those questions that just weren't addressed. Which it doesn't need to be fully fleshed out. So it's like, you could totally write those things off if this were a full novel. You can come up with whatever excuse, headcanon you need for that, but it's just a short story. So it's like, we're just probably silly and frivolous for even trying to ask those questions because it's not the intention of this tale. But yeah, they do feel like loose ends all the same. We're obviously not going to scorecard a short story, but if we were going to scorecard this in terms of the actual plot being developed, yeah, there's a lot of holes. The plot's not perfect. Buy-in, it's kind of cool, but why would I be bought into any of this? The opening scene in Athens in the Plaka district with the explosion and the ambassador, that kind of bought me in. I'm like, why'd they hit this ambassador? What happens when a U.S. ambassador gets hit? Who are the terrorists? But I'm not much bought in beyond that. So, fun little short story. Did it need to be published between Code of Conduct and Foreign Agent? That's another thing. I read it hoping it was going to inform something that will bring me into Foreign Agent. Yeah, post Code of Conduct pandemic. I have no idea why it was republished here because it has nothing to do with the book before it, nothing to do with the book after it. Just as out of the blue. And I kind of would have liked a little more connective tissue. I would have liked a little more.
Yeah. I don't know. It could be one of those things where, kind of like, what was it, Hidden Order, where we even brought this up to Brad. He had no choice.
Prelude and the epilogue.
It's just these, marketing gimmicks that, these book publishers are asking, and, instead of giving them the next chapter,
just make something
of Foreign Agent, he gave him this, which he already had.
Yeah. It's possible this could have been that. Yeah, this could have been another one of those. This one doesn't connect at all. Where those ones clearly were called a prelude and an epilogue, epilogue 2. They clearly were intended to add something in the beginning and end of the story. This one does not. And maybe that's actually what he learned with the first two, was people were upset. I didn't know there was more to this story. Well, now he could say, there's not really more to any story. It's just we were asked to give an extra thing and we gave an extra thing. But no, you didn't miss anything,
Yeah, because essentially what he gave him in the prelude and epilogue is probably stuff that hit the cutting room floor. That probably was there
Most
in the first draft, and they told him you need to trim it up, and because both of those scenes are non-consequential, right?
They're not.
Going to the guy and killing his falcons, or even the first half was
with the boat,
the takedown on the boat.
Yeah,
that's just all right. You take any Mission Impossible movie and you're immediately thrust into all right, what's Ethan Hunt's current mission? But then immediately we're going to pivot from that, and it's not going to be related at all. We're going to then go to the focus of what the story is going to be, right?
This one's just even less related than either of those were.
Right.
So
right.
It's kind of bizarre why it's here. Who knows? One of those things. And I do wonder when Brad, God damn it, we do this every episode. When Brad told us he's not going to do those things anymore, he felt like he was selling out when he was asked to please certain contracts with extra writing. But the readers are the ones he wants to please and give them his best in the novels that they're getting without needing to buy extra addendums. So maybe when he said in the afterword here, I do have many of these short stories planned and I'd like to bring them out, maybe he realized all those ideas I have, the readers deserve in their books. So all these things that he had wanted to do and could see himself doing as short stories, ultimately he just realized, why don't I just make those things integral to the novels that I'm going to sell? And probably worked in a lot of those things in future books.
Yeah, because I think the glory of short stories in this setting is not around our main character. Like, it would be way cooler, to get a bunch of troll short stories.
Sure, exactly.
In this case, or
Gary Lawler, Cold War.
Gary Lawler, go back in time.
Yeah.
Bullet
Bob,
Solvey.
Everybody, yeah,
pick a character, or
and they'll interact with the main character a little
bit. You have to have, I guess, like, you would have your main character in there for a little bit, but it would mainly be like a Brad Thor, or Scott Harvath universe, but it's someone else. And you think about like Mitch, we would love to have like a Scott short story.
Well, sure, but the other thing it allows you to do is you can have more of those short stories without messing with the timeline.
Right.
Because what 100% needs to be accounted for is Scott Harvath's time in the timeline. Like, would it have been realistic for Scott Harvath to be doing X, Y, and Z? Well, instead you could say, and this kind of happened with the Athena project, right? Like, you could say, I'm doing something with all these other characters who you see, but there's not as much of a stake or a risk in messing up their timeline because we didn't know where they were before or after. Like, they appeared in 2, 3, 4, 5 books. We don't know anything about them outside of that. So you can have them show up, see Scott somewhere, and be like, okay, Scott must have been there. It's like low stakes. We don't have to rewrite timelines or undo other things in other plots because Scott's over here. You see him for a flyby, he goes back to whatever he was doing, and you can explore those other characters. They're not already, locked into some place they're supposed to be in a time frame they're supposed to be there. So you can just kind of do them at will.
Yeah, and I think they actually executed that well with the Athena project.
Correct.
Because in the next novel, or he has like a one line to say, like, because I think like the plot of the Athena project was related to like the bombings in Rome and that kind of stuff. It was like a side piece, so bringing all that in together is perfect. It doesn't require much rework. You can literally have just one line, one paragraph, whatever, in between your novels.
Like Scott later on is like, remember when I saved you guys, after you took out that Italian guy in Venice or whatever?
Right.
And like that, you don't have to account for Scott, like where in the timeline was this going to happen? It just happened in the Athena project. It was mentioned later in the main series. That it is what it is.
Yeah. Does the teleporter ever come up? Like this, the super sci-fi like thing we got at the end of that novel ever have to come up again? No, it doesn't.
Under the Denver airport.
Which, to think back to that plot was freaking crazy. But
it's wild. Remember the body parts going through like portal?
Yeah.
And that mad scientist who would experiment. You do that though in a Scott Harvath novel, and the buy-in goes down, and readers start commenting, "What the hell? What the hell?" Yet you do it in a little side quest that Scott shows up for a few minutes, and it's like, cool. No problem, play around. Yeah. I love it. Anything that makes these universes bigger is usually fine by me. Like, go for it.
Super excited to see what Jack Carr is going to do with a Tom Rees
story. And Jack Carr, I think, he's got the secret sauce in a lot of ways. But one thing with that is, like, he teed this up for so long. We heard about Tom Rees in so many books. We wanted to see him.
And then haven't gotten, we've gotten barely a flashback about him, too.
Well, right. But he teed it up, and then he gives us a scene that actually involves Tom Rees as the prelude or the preface to a book. Right. And so it wets your whistle. And then 2 books later, it's announced it's going to be a Tom Rees novel. Like, it was the perfect. We were all teed up to want it. it's just perfect. It's perfect, like marketing, and how he's playing that is great.
Yeah, it allows you to give your main character rest. You can explore, be more creative with this new character. Like, I think more novels need to go down that route instead of like being forced to pump out, just another story every year. I mean, they're going to do it, but I think like I really like this strategy by it.
And sometimes it may involve pulling the plug. Like I applaud Kyle Mills because, hate to say this, I enjoyed each of the books in the moment, but looking back, after Enemy at the Gates, you got Oath of Loyalty, you got Code Red. You could clearly see that these were just like, I got to do another book. The deadline's coming. And I feel like he realized it wasn't his time anymore to keep that going. And then Don Bentley comes in and probably saw that as well and was like, I've got this outside the idea box. Can we go for it? And Simon Schuster greenlit it and like play around a little bit, try something new, take those risks, swing for the fences. I love to see it.
Yeah. No, I'd love to see more of this stuff, more of these things, like just give it to us. I don't know if it's just, fatigue from having like read all these books. And there's other people are we the only ones that like feel this way? Or are we just, shut up and enjoy your summer book?
Well, I don't know. Well, that's what Brian Costello was saying when we had him.
Yeah, he was kind of having the same vibes as us.
Well, he was like, I kind of just want to go back to what Kyle Mills was doing, deal with the Mitch Rapp, the Anna that we have now, Mitch and Claudia that we have now. Like, let's just keep this thing rolling. He's like, do you really want to go back and do the kill shot thing? Do you really want to go back and find out about other characters and who they were in the past? Kind of do. I want to move forward at the same time, but I also want to go back in the past.
Yeah.
So I think keep doing these things. I think the Athens Solution, though, is not exactly an example we're talking about because it doesn't connect enough. I want to see this a story like the Athens Solution, which is kind of cool, plug in just a little bit better. Like this ambassador, if he came up in a book or two and maybe didn't play a critical role, but this ambassador to Greece had something going on in another book, then grow that seed, Like that'd be fun to like, or the one we're about to cover. And actually right now, 10 o'clock at night, we're going to start recording a new episode on Foreign Agent, the book after Code of Conduct. There's this Hermann guy, Hermann is German. I want to know more about this dude. Like he operated with Scott.
We've had him so many times, bro.
No, it's the same guy. Not Herman the German. This is Herman the German?
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it is.
This is not Herman the German.
This is the same guy from all the books we've had.
No. This is him?
This is him. Yeah, it's the same guy who helped him in, because he even mentions like
the other Germany book.
Had some of his guys killed. Like, yeah.
Give me a spin off of that guy. Give me a short story with that guy.
Yeah,
like,
no,
I love
exactly.
every time he comes up. Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize it's the same one. Oh, that's even better. And actually, that makes sense from the book because Alexandra comes back as well, who was in that book as the Soviet lady. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll do more of that. Just keep that up. Love this. Foreign Agent. I'm ready to talk about it.
All right, let's do it, bro. All right, before we do that, let me thank our patrons. Our Deputy Director, Sharia, our Special Operator, Jason C., our Special Agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Peggy, Mark, and Chris. Please subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just let Brad be Brad.